When I was 12, my parents packed me off into foster care so they could chase some half-baked dream with my sister. Now here they are, jobless, desperate, and suddenly acting like family means something. So I gave them the response they earned. Name's Jeremy. I'm 24 now, but this story kicks off over a decade ago when I was still a kid just trying to figure things out. Back then, I honestly thought everything was pretty normal, or at least normal enough. We weren't rich, but we had a roof over our heads, clothes that fit, and food on the table. That counted for something. My folks, Andrea and Austin, kept things looking picture-perfect on the outside. No warning signs, no big blowouts. Just quiet smiles and the usual parent stuff until one day the ground dropped out from under me. And then there was Megan, my older sister, their golden girl. You know, the kind straight-A student, perfect posture, always knew the right thing to say. Teachers adored her. Neighbors complimented her. My parents? They practically worshipped the ground she walked on. If she painted a stick figure, it was a masterpiece. If I did the same, it was like, cool, Jeremy. Now go wash your hands. It's not that I was causing trouble or failing at life, I was just overlooked. No matter how hard I tried, I felt like background noise in my own home. Megan's drawings got magnets on the fridge. Mine got stuffed in a drawer or, worse, politely ignored. But here's the thing, I never blamed Megan. She wasn't the one handing out the praise or choosing who mattered more. Still, growing up in someone else's shadow has a way of making you feel like you're barely there. The day everything changed started like any other. I was in my room, sprawled on the floor with my beat-up action figures, pretending they were still cool even though I was starting to age out of them. It was one of those lazy afternoons until I heard Andrea call my name from downstairs. Her voice had that weird, fake calmness, the kind that sets off alarms in your gut. I figured maybe I forgot to do a chore or something. But when I got to the living room, I knew immediately this wasn't about dishes. Andrea and Austin were sitting side by side on the couch, stiff and quiet like they'd rehearsed something. Austin motioned toward the chair across from them. "Take a seat, Jeremy," he said, like I was being called into a job interview, not a conversation with my parents. Andrea tried on her soft voice and sympathetic eyes, but it felt off. I sat down, confused, heart-thudding, waiting for the blow. Then came the words, "Jeremy, we need to talk about something important." My stomach dropped. I thought maybe someone had died. Maybe Grandpa finally passed or something. But no, it was worse. "We've run into some financial difficulties," Austin said flatly, "and we can't afford to take care of you anymore." I remember blinking, thinking I must have misheard. Like, what do you mean can't afford me? Since when was I something you could just stop paying for? Like I was an internet plan they decided wasn't worth renewing? Andrea kept talking, spewing words like, "It's not your fault, honey, and we've been struggling for a while." They made it sound like they were talking about trimming a grocery bill, not shipping off their son. Still trying to make sense of it, I asked, "What about Megan? Why can't she go?" It came out harsh, but I was desperate to understand. Andrea's face hardened for just a second real fast, but I saw it. Then she said, "Megan's in school. She needs to stay somewhere stable." Stable? As if I didn't need that too. Austin chimed in with some nonsense about how this wasn't about favoritism, it was about what made the most sense. As if what made sense was tossing their 12-year-old son into the system like he was excess baggage. And that's when I broke. I mean really broke. I started crying loud, messy, can't catch your breath crying. The kind you can't control, the kind you don't forget. Andrea reached out to hug me. I shoved her off. "Why?" I asked over and over. But all they gave me were those same dull deadlines about tough choices and doing what's best. The next day, they packed a small duffel bag and drove me to the foster home like it was just another errand to run. The car ride was dead silent. Not the kind of silence that says people are thinking, more like the kind that says everything that needed to be said has already been said and no one wants to deal with the wreckage. I kept looking at them, silently begging one of them to turn around, to say this was a mistake, that I was coming back home. But they never did. When we pulled up to the house, I stayed in the car, hoping, just hoping, that someone would snap out of it and take me back. But Austin just turned around and said, "Come on, Jeremy. Let's get this over with." Like he was checking off a to-do list. I got out, clutching the bag that held what little of my life they bothered to pack. The couple at the door, Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, smiled warmly, but I barely registered them. My entire focus was on the two people getting ready to walk out of my life. Andrea knelt down and said, "We love you. This isn't goodbye forever. Just give it time." Then she kissed my forehead. Like that would erase everything. Austin didn't hug me, just reached out and shook my hand like I was some kid he met once at a barbecue. Then they turned and left. I stood on the porch, watching the taillights fade down the road. With every second, my chest felt tighter. I kept thinking they'll come back. They have to, but they didn't. That night, I lay in a strange bed, in a strange house, replaying the whole thing over and over. What did I do to deserve this? Why was I the one they gave up on? Why Megan and not me? Those questions stayed with me for weeks. And the worst part? I never got an answer. All I had was their fake promise that this was temporary. And maybe part of me clung to that, but deep down I already knew. I wasn't going home. Looking back now, I realized that was the day everything changed. Not just because they left, but because of how they did it. Like I was some heavy thing they were relieved to finally put down. But at 12, I didn't have the words for all that. I just knew I'd been left behind. The Andersons tried, over the next few days, to make me feel welcome. They really did. But honestly, I felt like a guest in someone else's life. Every morning, Mrs. Anderson would whip up pancakes like it was a ritual. Not the box mix kind either, real ones, golden brown, buttery, with a little cinnamon in the batter. Mr. Anderson had a habit of poking his head into my room with random facts. Stuff like, "Did you know octopuses have 3 hearts?" It was weird at first, like he was trying too hard. And maybe he was. But still, they were trying. Thing is, I wasn't ready to trust anyone. Not them. Not teachers. Not even kids my age. I kept my guard up, like if I let it down, I'd get blindsided again. My parents had sworn up and down that this was just temporary. So I clung to that lie like it was a life preserver in open water. I told myself they'd call. Maybe write. Maybe show up one day and say they made a mistake. I kept picturing some moment where they'd explain it all. Tell me they had no choice. That they missed me. That we'd go home and pretend none of this ever happened. But days rolled into weeks. Weeks stretched into months. And before I knew it, years had slipped by. Not a call. Not a letter. Nothing but silence. It wasn't until I started school again that the weight of it started to really land on me. Being the new kid comes with questions. People were curious. Where'd you move from? Why'd you transfer mid-year? I didn't have the strength or maybe the guts to tell the truth. So I lied, shrugged and said something like, "Oh, my parents are working out of state for a while." Tasted bitter even as I said it, like I was chewing on ashes. But it kept people from digging deeper. Then one afternoon, I was lying on the Andersons' couch, pretending to do homework, half scrolling through my phone, when I got this stupid idea to look my parents up online. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe some scrap of proof they still remembered I existed. What I found hit me like a gut punch. There they were, Austin and Andrea, on a beach somewhere, all tanned and grinning like teenagers on spring break. The water behind them looked like something off a travel brochure. The caption, "Finally living our dream life." I just stared at it. My heart dropped into my stomach. Then I scrolled down. More pictures, cocktails, cruises, sunsets. Fancy dinners where the plates looked more like artwork than food. And in every other post, Megan. Always smiling, front and center. The golden child, living it up while I was stuck trying to survive in a stranger's house. Caption after caption said things like, "Proud of our amazing daughter," or "So lucky to have this little light in our lives." Not a single mention of me. It was like I'd been edited out of their lives completely. The more I saw, the angrier I got. They said they couldn't afford to raise me, but here they were, living like lifestyle influencers. First-class flights, spa days, snorkeling in crystal-clear water. I felt like my head was about to explode. They didn't just leave me. They replaced me with a beach and a blog. And yeah, they had a blog. A whole travel site documenting their journey to freedom. They wrote about how shedding material things had helped them rediscover their purpose. And I guess I was one of those things. They even had a post, no joke, about emotional decluttering. I swear, it felt like they were bragging about cutting me loose. That's when I saw the comments. Buried beneath all the "so inspiring" and #lifegoals replies, there was one from an account with no photo, just a gray circle and the username unknown traveler. Must be nice running away and leaving everything behind. Hope it doesn't catch up to you. It read like a punch. Sharp. Direct. like it was written to slice through all their sugar-coated captions. My mind started racing. Was that about me? Did someone know what they did? Was it just a troll or someone with a score to settle? I clicked the profile, but it was locked up tight. No info, no posts, just that one eerie comment. Then I saw another. Under a picture of Andrea sipping some ridiculous cocktail in a hammock, someone had written, "Guess skipping town was worth it after all." My chest tightened. Skipping town? Like they were on the run or something. I scrolled through more posts, hoping for another clue. But those were the only two that stood out. The rest of the comments were all sunshine and emojis from people too blinded by pretty pictures to see what was underneath. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Who wrote those comments? Did they know something I didn't? I mean, Austin and Andrea were never exactly honest people. But what if there was more to the story? Something deeper? But what could I do? I didn't have access to their past. I didn't even know where they were anymore. I just sat there, my hands trembling as I closed my laptop, wondering what else they'd lied about. The worst part wasn't the vacations. It wasn't even that they left. It was that they looked happy. Like leaving me behind was the best thing they'd ever done. That night, over dinner, I must have looked like I'd seen a ghost. I wasn't exactly hiding my mood. "You all right, Jeremy?" Mr. Anderson asked, setting down his fork and giving me that dad look he does when he's trying to figure out if something's wrong. "Yeah," I muttered, not convincing. But Mrs. Anderson wasn't the kind of person who lets things go just like that. "You don't have to talk," she said softly. "But if something's on your mind, we're here." That broke me. I told them everything about the blog, the pictures, the captions. I didn't expect much. Maybe you should stop checking up on them, or try not to dwell. But they didn't say any of that. Mrs. Anderson listened without interrupting, just nodding with those soft, kind eyes. Mr. Anderson? He looked like he was ready to punch Austin through a wall. "What they did to you," he said, his voice low and firm. "That's on them, not you. Don't ever let anyone try to make you carry that." It wasn't some big emotional speech or anything, but it hit hard. Because until that moment, no one had ever said that to me out loud. That it wasn't my fault. After that, something shifted. Slowly. The Andersons didn't fix me, and they didn't try to. But they showed up day after day. Asked me how school was. Helped me study for tests. Encouraged me to try out for stuff. I joined a couple of clubs. Even made a few friends. Things got bearable. Maybe even kind of okay. But the anger? That didn't go away. If anything, it settled deeper in me. Not just for what Austin and Andrea did, but for how easy it was for them to do it. Like cutting me out was just one step on their path to enlightenment. Still, I made myself a promise. I wasn't going to be their mistake. I wasn't going to be their leftover. They may have chosen to leave, but I'd be the one who chose who I became. Getting involved at school wasn't about making friends or suddenly turning into Mr. Social. I just needed to keep myself occupied. Staying busy kept my mind from wandering back to thoughts I didn't want to deal with. The first thing I joined was the debate team. I figured, hell, I'd spent enough years arguing with Austin and Andrea. Might as well turn that into a skill. To my surprise, I was good at it. Not just decent, really good. Something about being able to take a mess of thoughts and twist them into something sharp and clear felt powerful. Then I got a part-time job. Mr. Anderson had been casually nudging the idea for a while, mentioning how a little spending money might feel good. Eventually I gave in and applied at a small bookstore downtown. Nothing fancy, but it felt like the right place for me. Quiet, full of stories and people who liked talking about them. It gave me something I didn't even know I was craving. Independence. Every paycheck, no matter how small, felt like proof I could stand on my own. I didn't have to rely on anyone anymore. Not even the Andersons, as kind as they were. That money, that was mine. And that feeling, I'd earned it. Around then, I met Gerald. We clicked fast. He didn't treat me like a sad charity case or tiptoe around my past. When I finally told him about Austin and Andrea, he didn't get weird. Just looked at me, nodded and said, "Man, that's messed up. Wanna play some video games?" And that was it. He didn't try to fix it. He didn't pity me. He just got it in a way that made me feel normal. One day, I got home from school and the house was too quiet. Normally, Mrs. Anderson would be humming along to some old Beatles song while baking something she claimed wasn't dessert even though it always tasted like it was. Mr. Anderson would be in the garage halfway through fixing something that probably didn't need fixing. But not this time. Instead, I heard voices, low, serious ones, coming from the dining room. I crept down the hallway, heart starting to thump. I wasn't trying to spy exactly, but something in their tone stopped me cold. Should we tell him? That was Mrs. Anderson, her voice soft but tense. He deserves to know, Mr. Anderson replied. If it's about him, we can't just pretend it doesn't exist. But he's finally doing well, she said. This letter barely explains anything. We should wait at least until we know more. It could be nothing. I pressed my back to the wall. My name hadn't come up yet, but it was all over their voices. Then Mr. Anderson said, fine, we'll hold off. But if they reach out again, we tell him everything. They? Reach out again? My stomach dropped. I barely made it to the kitchen in time to pretend I'd just walked in. Mrs. Anderson smiled when she saw me like nothing was going on, but I knew. Something wasn't right. That night, long after the lights were out and the house had gone still, I snuck into the dining room. I knew it was wrong. I'd never done anything like that before, but I needed answers. The letter wasn't hard to find. It was buried in a stack of mail near the edge of the table, but the envelope had my name on it. I froze for a second, just staring at it. The return address was from a law office. My hands were shaking as I opened it. The first few lines were enough to make my vision blur. To whom it may concern, this notice pertains to unresolved financial obligations tied to Austinui and Andrea, last name, as guardians of Jeremy. I didn't read the rest. Debts. Not mine. Theirs. They hadn't left me because they couldn't feed me. They left because they couldn't face the mess they'd made. Dumping me wasn't about protecting me, it was about escaping the consequences. I tucked the letter back in the envelope and slid it back into the pile, careful to leave no trace. But I couldn't unsee it. Couldn't unknow it. The lies ran deeper than I thought. By the time I hit 16, my life had found some rhythm. I was juggling school, work, and clubs, and for once, everything felt like it was moving. My grades were strong, and my debate coach started pulling me aside after practice to talk about scholarships, real ones. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine a future that wasn't weighed down by Austin and Andrea. A future that was mine. And then something amazing happened. A letter came in the mail, the kind of envelope that practically buzzes in your hands. I tore it open and there it was, full ride scholarship awarded. I just stood there for a minute staring at it, making sure I was reading it right. Then I bolted downstairs. Mrs. Anderson screamed when she read it. Mr. Anderson just kept clapping me on the back like I'd won a championship. That moment? I'll carry it with me forever. It was the first time I truly felt like I'd earned something big on my own. Later that night, I broke my usual rule and posted about it on social media. Just a short message, something like, hard work pays off. Grateful for the people who believed in me. Likes started popping up almost immediately. Comments from classmates, old teachers, even kids I barely knew. But then I saw one that made my blood run cold. From Andrea. We're so proud of you, Jeremy. Let's reconnect soon. Proud? Yeah? After everything? I stared at that comment, stunned. Not just because she had the nerve to say it, but because it was so casual, like we were just some estranged cousins who lost touch after a family reunion. I didn't reply. I didn't think. I just deleted the comment and blocked both of them. That was the moment I knew I didn't need them. Not their pride. Not their apologies. Not even their explanations. I had a life now, one they didn't build and couldn't claim. After that, I threw myself even harder into school. I wanted to prove, not to them, but to myself, that I wasn't a footnote in their story. I was the author of mine. Mr. Anderson started teaching me how to handle money. Real stuff, budgets, savings, credit scores. It wasn't flashy, but it gave me something I'd never had, a sense of control. A roadmap. And with their encouragement, I started tutoring kids at school. At first, I just did it because someone asked. But I ended up loving it. Helping younger students figure things out, watching the light bulb moments, it gave me purpose. One afternoon, during a break between tutoring sessions, Gerald leaned back in his chair and asked, "So, where do you see yourself in 5 years?" He said it like it was nothing, like we were just killing time. But to me, that question felt huge. I didn't answer Gerald right away. His question caught me off guard. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? I hadn't really thought that far ahead. After a second, I said, honestly, I just want to be stable. Have my own place, my own life. and not have to lean on anybody to get by. Gerald nodded like he got it. That's solid, he said with a grin. Just don't forget to have some fun along the way. And that line stuck with me, because he was right. I'd been grinding so hard to prove something, to myself, to my past, maybe even to ghosts, that I'd forgotten life was meant to be lived, not just survived. So I made a quiet promise to loosen up a bit. Say yes more often. Game nights with friends. Last-minute road trips to nowhere. Lazy Sundays just sitting in the park doing absolutely nothing. They weren't big things, but they brought me back to life in a way books and paychecks couldn't. By the end of that school year, I felt like someone new. Not just some kid trying to outrun his past, but a guy with a future, a path that was finally his own. The Andersons weren't just foster parents anymore. They were my people. Gerald felt more like a brother than any blood relation I'd ever known. Sure, the pain of being left behind still showed up sometimes, but it didn't steer the wheel anymore. If anything, it gave me gas, pushed me forward. Then came graduation. It was supposed to be my victory lap, the day I finally stood tall and said, I made it. Not in spite of everything, but because I worked my ass off to get here. The weeks leading up to it flew by. Between finals, work, and planning a small get-together at the Andersons' place, I barely had time to breathe. But there was excitement buzzing through the house. Even Gerald, who normally acted too cool for anything sentimental, was genuinely stoked for me. I remember the morning of graduation so clearly. I woke up early without even needing an alarm. My nerves were shot, my stomach was doing flips, and all I could think about was how far I'd come. From the day I stood on the Andersons' porch with a duffel bag, to this moment. Mrs. Anderson had ironed my gown the night before and hung it on my door. There was a little sticky note stuck to the hanger. So proud of you, Jeremy. That note hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just a sentence. It was everything. Every quiet ride to school. Every late-night pep talk. Every bit of love they gave me, even when I didn't know how to take it. The ceremony went as you'd expect. Long speeches, names being called one by one, parents snapping photos like paparazzi. But when they said my name and I stepped across that stage to grab my diploma, something inside me cracked open. I heard the Andersons yelling my name. Gerald was practically whistling like I just scored the winning touchdown. I felt like a rock star. It was everything I'd hoped it would be. For about 10 minutes. After the ceremony, we gathered outside to take pictures. The Andersons were glowing. Gerald kept making jokes about my diploma being written in crayon. Megan even showed up, which was rare. She usually stayed at arm's length from all this stuff. It was one of those rare, perfect moments. I felt weightless. Then I saw them, Austin and Andrea, standing just outside the crowd, looking wildly out of place. Like they just wandered in from a vacation cruise. For a second, I thought I was seeing things. But no, there they were, smiling, scanning the crowd like they were looking for someone. I froze. I hadn't spoken to them in years. I definitely hadn't invited them. And yet there they were, like this was their moment too. I tried to ignore them, thinking maybe they'd leave if I didn't acknowledge them. But of course, Austin spotted me. He gave that smug half-smile and started walking over, Andrea trailing behind, her expression somewhere between nervous and fake happy. My whole body tensed up. Jeremy, Andrea said, her voice bright and sugary, like she wasn't the same person who left me behind. You look so grown up. Austin gave me a pat on the shoulder like we were old buddies. We're so proud of you, son. This is a big day, for all of us. All of us? That actually made me laugh. Out loud. The kind of bitter laugh that bubbles up when you're too shocked to cry and too angry to scream. The Andersons and Gerald had stepped closer by now, watching everything unfold. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting to see how I'd handle it. What are you doing here? I asked. My voice was steady, but my hands were clenched so tight they hurt. We came to celebrate with you, Austin said. Like that made any kind of sense. Andrea chimed in, trying to sound sincere. We know we've made mistakes, but we always wanted the best for you. We've missed you. We thought maybe this could be a fresh start. For the family. I stared at them. Really looked. They looked older, sure, but not broken. Not sorry. Just uncomfortable. Like people who'd shown up to a party they weren't invited to, hoping no one would kick them out. You don't get to call yourselves my family, I said. You left me. Dropped me off like luggage you didn't want to carry anymore. You didn't check on me. Didn't, right? Didn't care. And now you want to pretend none of that happened. Andrea's smile cracked. Austin's face turned red. That's not fair, he said, trying to keep calm. We did what we thought was best. For who? I snapped. For you? Because it sure as hell wasn't best for me. You were off posting sunset selfies while I was learning how to survive. You don't get to rewrite history just because I turned out okay. People around us had started to glance our way. The tension was obvious. Then Megan, quiet, careful Megan, stepped forward. She looked at our parents and said, clear as day, you don't get to ruin this for him. Not today. You've done enough. I don't know who was more surprised, me or them. Austin looked like he wanted to argue, but Andrea leaned in, whispering something under her breath. They both stared at me a moment longer, then turned and walked away. Just like before. Only this time, it didn't break me. It felt like closure. The Andersons came in fast, hugging me like they were trying to glue all the broken pieces back together. Gerald handed me a tissue and muttered, you should bill them for emotional damages. And somehow that actually made me laugh. The rest of that graduation day passed in a kind of warm, blurry haze. We headed back to the Andersons' house where they'd gone all out, streamers across the fence, balloons tied to chairs, a little "Congrats Jeremy" sign fluttering in the breeze. They'd even made my favorite food, Mrs. Anderson's baked mac and cheese, the kind with the crispy top. For a few golden hours I let it all go, the years of resentment, the ghosts in the crowd. I let myself smile, eat too much, laugh at Gerald's ridiculous jokes. I looked around and realized these people, the ones who chose me, were the only ones who really mattered. That night, once everything had quieted down and the house was asleep, I sat out on the porch. Megan joined me without saying a word, just dropped down beside me and pulled her knees up to her chest. She stared into the darkness for a while before finally speaking. I'm sorry, she said softly. For everything. I didn't see it before, but you were right. They only ever looked out for themselves. They used us. I didn't know what to say to that. I just nodded. The silence between us was heavy but not uncomfortable. It was like, for the first time, we were both seeing the same truth and letting it sit there between us. That porch moment meant more than any apology ever could. Graduation wasn't just about a diploma. It was the day I finally drew the line, stood up for myself, and let go of the people who had tried so hard to convince me I was disposable. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. And deep down, I knew Austin and Andrea weren't done. A week later, I got an email from Andrea. At first, my heart did that dumb thing where it hoped maybe, just maybe, it was an apology. But I knew better. The message was long, bloated with excuses. She talked about how hard life had been, how they'd struggled, how they'd always had my best interests at heart. All the greatest hits of manipulative storytelling. Then she dropped the real reason for writing. We hope we can put the past behind us and reconnect as a family. You're doing so well, Jeremy. Maybe you could help us out a little during this difficult time. Help them. After everything they'd done or never done, they had the nerve to ask for my help. I didn't even finish reading. I deleted the email and blocked the address, but the anger clung to me like smoke after a fire. Megan, ever the reluctant messenger, had been keeping tabs on them. She called later that week and filled me in on the latest drama. Apparently, their dream life had finally crumbled under its own weight. They'd blown through their savings trying to look like jet-setting life coaches. Their travel blog flopped, their social media sponsorships dried up, and now they were broke, couch-hopping with distant relatives who, according to Megan, were rapidly losing patience. They're a mess, she said. Still blaming you, by the way. They think if you just forgive them, everything would go back to normal. Forgive them for what exactly? I snapped. For making me homeless when I was 12? For pretending I didn't exist while they played house with Megan on a beach somewhere? I'm not defending them, she said. I'm just telling you what they're saying. I didn't celebrate their downfall, but I wasn't shedding any tears over it either. They built the collapse with their own hands. Meanwhile, my life was finally moving forward. Then came the next hit. One afternoon, I got a LinkedIn notification. I figured it was just a classmate or someone from work. Nope. Austin and Andrea had found me. They'd commented on a post I made about my scholarship. We're so proud of you, Jeremy. Let's catch up soon. Same script. Same fake pride. I blocked them immediately, but it wasn't enough. They started messaging people in my network, former teachers, coworkers, even the Andersons. The messages were all laced with guilt and lies, how they missed me, how I'd cut them off unfairly, how they were trying to reconnect with their son. It was like watching a PR campaign unfold in real time. One day, my boss at the bookstore pulled me aside. "I don't mean to pry," she said, "but someone emailed the store saying they were your parents." It was weird. My stomach dropped. "I'm so sorry," I said. "They're not part of my life. I'll take care of it." She nodded. "No worries. Just figured I'd let you know. And for the record, we've got your back." I walked home that day with a heavy heart and a clenched jaw. They weren't just trying to worm their way back into my life, they were trying to sabotage it from the outside. That was the line. Megan must have felt the shift too, because the next day she posted a public statement on social media. She didn't sugarcoat a thing. She wrote about how Austin and Andrea abandoned both of us, how they refused to take responsibility, how they expected forgiveness without even earning acknowledgement. Her words were brutal and honest. "Jeremy and I rebuilt our lives without their help. We owe them nothing." Her post blew up. Hundreds of comments poured in from people offering support. Strangers, friends, classmates, even some extended family who hadn't known the full story. It felt validating. But it also lit a fuse. Austin and Andrea started posting their own rants, melodramatic nonsense about how they were misunderstood, how ungrateful we were, how they had sacrificed so much. But it backfired. The more they spoke, the more obvious it became they were spinning lies. Then Megan called me. "Remember their old storage unit?" she said, practically buzzing. Turns out they stopped paying the fees and the landlord was clearing it out. I asked if I could grab a few things before it got dumped. I found something. An hour later, she showed up at my apartment with a worn-out cardboard box. "You need to see this," she said, dropping it on the kitchen table. Inside was a folder crammed with documents, past due bills, foreclosure letters, credit card statements, failed business proposals scribbled with red ink. It was a paper trail of disaster. They were drowning, Megan said. Living way above their means. Starting things they couldn't finish. Then just running. Near the bottom was a letter from a lawyer, some formal language about restructuring debt and reducing financial dependence. And there it was, my name, listed like I was a car payment they were trying to get rid of. My hands curled into fists. "They didn't leave because they couldn't afford me," I said quietly. "They left because I was a problem they didn't want to deal with." Megan didn't say anything right away. She just sat there beside me, letting the truth settle between us. "I thought you deserved to know," she finally said. I nodded. "Thanks." I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat there, feeling the weight of something I'd carried for so long finally shift. It wasn't closure, not exactly. But it was clarity. And that mattered more. After Megan left that night, I sat at the table staring at the folder she'd brought. Part of me wanted to rip it apart, set it on fire, watch it all burn. But another part, maybe the smarter part, knew I needed to keep it. Not for them, but for me. For the truth. For closure. So I tucked it away. By the time I headed off to college, Austin and Andrea's reputation was in the gutter. Whatever image they tried so hard to project had crumbled. Their GoFundMe campaigns were being flagged for fraud, and the relatives who once let them crash on their couches had finally had enough. Megan said they were living out of their car, still convinced I owed them something, still spinning their story like they were the victims. Meanwhile, I was finally thriving. College felt like fresh air after years of suffocating. I poured myself into my classes, determined to make the most of my scholarship. Every book I read, every test I passed, every late night I spent studying felt like a step toward the life I'd always wanted, one that I built. On the side, I started running financial literacy workshops on campus. It wasn't anything fancy, just small sessions for students who, like me, had grown up without anyone teaching them the basics. Budgeting, credit, saving, how not to drown in debt. Stuff that actually mattered. I never forgot what the Anderson S had taught me. Passing it on felt like a way to pay it forward. Then, second semester, I got a call from Megan. "You're not gonna believe this," she said, sounding somewhere between exhausted and pissed. "They showed up at my apartment." My stomach dropped. "What?" "They were crying," she said. "Begging me to talk to you. Said they're desperate." I closed my eyes, already feeling the old headache coming on. "What did you say?" "I told them to leave. And that if they came back, I'd call the cops." I was quiet for a second. Not because I didn't believe her, but because I did. Megan, the girl who used to keep her head down and avoid conflict, had drawn a hard line. I was proud of her. She had changed. We both had. But Austin and Andrea? They hadn't changed at all. And they weren't about to stop. First came the anonymous phone calls. Random numbers, blocked IDs, always at weird hours. I ignored them, most of the time. But one afternoon, I slipped and answered. "Jeremy, what is wrong with you?" A voice snapped before I could say hello. It was Aunt Karen, a relative I hadn't heard from in years. "Excuse me," I said, stunned. "Your parents are living in their car, and you're just ignoring them? Pretending they don't exist? They're your family, Jeremy. You owe them something." I nearly laughed. Kindness? Did they show me kindness when they left me with strangers and never looked back? When they ghosted me for years while posting beach selfies and pretending I didn't exist? Gabriel paused, clearly not expecting resistance. "They made mistakes, Jeremy. People screw up. You're being cold." I hung up. I wasn't about to argue with someone who had no clue what it was like to be tossed aside like I was an inconvenience. Over the next few weeks, the calls kept coming. Distant cousins. A great aunt I hadn't seen since I was 10. All of them reading from the same tired script. "They're your parents? You only get one family? Why are you being so ungrateful?" None of them had been there. Not when I cried myself to sleep in the Anderson-S guest room. Not when I had to pretend I was okay just to get through the day. They didn't know me. They didn't get a say. Then Austin and Andrea escalated. I got an email from a lawyer, someone claiming to represent them. The subject line made my stomach twist. Notice of intent to pursue financial support. I opened it, already feeling sick. A wall of legal fluff hit me like a punch, but the message was clear. They were threatening to sue me for financial abandonment. They wanted money. Apparently, they believed that now that I was doing well, I owed them support. Like I was some lottery ticket they'd forgotten to cash. It was so absurd I actually laughed. Out loud. I wasn't rich. I was barely out of my first year in college. And legally, I'd been in foster care. I didn't owe them a cent. I forwarded the email to a lawyer the Anderson-S had put me in touch with. Someone who'd helped me apply for financial aid and scholarships. She reviewed the message and replied within the hour. "They don't have a case. They're just trying to scare you. Don't respond. Let me handle it." That should have been enough to let it go. But the bitterness lingered. It wasn't about money. It was about how easily they could twist the truth. How they could still try to make me the villain in a story they'd abandoned long ago. So instead of letting it eat away at me, I channeled it into my work. By then, my little side project had grown into something bigger. My workshops turned into a campus organization. Then a nonprofit. I started working with other schools, youth centers, even a few national partners. It felt like every milestone was a brick in the life I was building. One that had nothing to do with them. Then I got an email I never saw coming. It was from a producer. They were working on a docuseries about resilience and wanted to feature me. At first, I hesitated. I wasn't sure I wanted to turn my life into a story people could binge-watch on a streaming platform. But after talking with the Anderson-S and Megan, I realized something. This wasn't about me airing dirty laundry. This was about helping other kids like I used to be, see that it can get better. So I said yes. The filming process was surreal. Sitting in front of cameras, being asked to talk about pain I'd buried years ago. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. Toward the end, the producer asked if I wanted to mention Austin and Andrea. I thought about it for a long moment. "If it helps the message," I said finally. "Sure, but this isn't about revenge. It's about showing people that your past doesn't get to define your future." That's what I wanted the story to be. Not about what I'd lost, but what I'd built. Yes, they'd hurt me. Yes, they'd abandoned me. But they didn't get to own me anymore. So I told my story. The truth. And it felt like the final chapter one didn't know I needed to write. I talked about what it felt like to be left behind. How it guts you in quiet ways. How the silence is sometimes louder than the shouting ever was. I talked about what it meant to find family in the least expected places. Not by blood, but by choice. By love. By consistency. I talked about the people who caught me when I was falling and how I learned slowly, stubbornly to stand again. And I talked about the moment I stopped letting the past drive and finally took the wheel myself. When the episode aired a few months later, I braced for a trickle of messages. Maybe a handful. Instead, it was a flood. Emails, DMs, handwritten letters. Strangers opening up like we'd known each other for years. Foster kids who finally felt seen. Social workers telling me they played my story for new trainees. Teachers saying it gave them a new perspective. Even parents, good ones, who just wanted to do better. It was overwhelming, but in the best kind of way. For the first time in my life, I'd taken something broken and turned it into something that could help people heal. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was giving something back. Austin and Andrea predictably tried to claw their way back in again. This time it was a message from Austin, long, meandering, dripping in the usual blend of self-pity and half-baked regret. He talked about mistakes, how no one's perfect, how they still loved me and hoped we could start over. I didn't respond. Because I didn't need to. That part of my life was already behind me and I had no intention of reopening a door I'd finally closed for good. These days, Megan and I talk often. We check in, share wins, vent when life gets heavy. She's doing her own thing now, living on her own terms, not theirs. Building a life she can be proud of. Watching her grow has been one of the most unexpectedly healing parts of this whole journey. The Anderson-s? They're still around. Still cheering me on. Still treating me like I matter, like I always did. Sunday dinners, random texts, little notes of encouragement when I least expect them. They never stopped showing up. And me? I'm doing better than I ever thought I could. I've built something strong, something honest. I've built a life I don't have to explain away or hide from. A life where I know my worth, even if the people who were supposed to love me first never saw it. Whatever comes next, whatever turns the road takes, I know this. I'm not the kid they left behind. I'm the man who kept walking anyway.